So what about Japan overall? Like, what do you like the most about Japan?
The freedom, the sense of security. I have no fear here. I am a free black man here.
Welcome to the Melanated Files. In this series, we highlight and share the stories of black people from across the globe. Remember to subscribe to this channel for weekly videos and also follow us on social media for regular updates. Let's get into the interview. Welcome to another episode of the Melanated Files. My name is Ranzo, and today we're joined by Robert Jefferson, journalism professor at Temple University in Japan, broadcast journalist as well, and Air Force veteran. So we're going to get into his story right now. Robert has actually been in Japan for going on 38 years. You heard that correct. 38 years. That's older than I am, plus his dog combined, I think. But we're going to get into the interview right now. Robert, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for coming all the way out to Kamakura. It's quite a long distance to
But it's
come.
beautiful. It's beautiful.
It is, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, where am I from? I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on the east coast of the United States. Grew up in a small town outside of the city called Penlyn. It was a beautiful, beautiful place there, almost like here, a lot of trees and nature and whatnot. After high school, I actually went to Temple University in Philadelphia, the main campus, and now I'm teaching here at the Japan campus.
So tell me, why Japan? Why Japan?
Ever since I was a young boy, I've always had a desire, a dream to come to Japan. When I was young, the neighbors across the street, the mother, the wife, Fusae Jones, was from Yokohama, which is just up the road from here. And I just found her fascinating and Japan fascinating. You know, back then, you had anime back then as well, Speed Racer. Which here in Japan was called Maha Agogo.
Okay.
Yeah. So I just found it quite fascinating, and eventually I was able to come here, and I'll tell you how that happened in a little bit.
Okay. So I know you. I think it was the Air Force, right? The Air Force brought you to Japan, right? So tell us about what got you interested in the Air Force.
Interesting. I had a good friend. His name was Tony DeLago. He died many decades ago in a tragic accident. He was hit by a car while walking at night, going to or coming from his work. And I was interested in television and broadcasting since I was a freshman in high school, since I was like 14 years old. And I took every year the television production course at my high school, Wissahickon High School in Ambler, Pennsylvania, the next town over from where I grew up. And well, let me just give a little brief history here. Okay. When I was 16 years old, I began working as an apprentice for WDAS AM and FM in Philadelphia for a community service show, a Sunday morning program called The Breakfast Show. And then I was taken under the wing of my mentor, Brahim Ahmadiyya, and I worked in the newsroom with such luminaries as Mumia Abu Jamal, who's serving a life in prison sentence for allegedly killing a police officer in Philadelphia, Daniel Faulkner. When I was 17 years old, I went down to the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, and took a test to get my third-class radio telephone operator's permit, basically a license to be able to touch all the machinery in a radio and television station. And here I'm 17 years old, I passed the test, and there were men in their 30s and 40s who were crying because they failed the test. So I knew I was on the right track. So my friend Tony DeLago, he said, Bobby, I was known as Bobby then, don't call me Bobby, no, please don't. He says, I'm thinking about going to the Air Force, and the recruiter's coming to meet me tomorrow. Can you come and, just sort of hang out with me and while we talk to him? And I said, sure. He just wanted a handheld, he wanted me to hold his hand, I guess. And the recruiter looked at me and said, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, I'm fine. I'm going into broadcasting. And he said, don't you realize that the Air Force has the largest radio and television network in the world? I was like, get out of here. CNN hadn't even been born yet. This was 1978, the fall of 1978. CNN wasn't even in existence. Cable was, nobody had cable unless you lived in a big city like New York. So he says, yeah. And I said, really? I said, get out of here. And he said, no. And he came back later, brought some pamphlets and whatnot. I was like, Japan, the Middle East. This is my ticket. So I was a freshman at Temple University and actually left to go into the Air Force. I studied at the Defense Information School of Journalism and Public Affairs. My first assignment was in Incirlik, Turkey. Actually, the nearby city is Adana, Turkey, which is in south-central Turkey. And on my 19th birthday, I'm flying from JFK in New York, first to Italy, to Rome, then to Athens, and then to Istanbul. Oh, wow. I spent the night in Istanbul. So here I am on my 19th birthday, spend the night in Istanbul, and I'm looking out, the hotel window at Istanbul. I'm saying, wow, I'm here. And so my term of service there was 15 months. Okay. And from there I went on to Lodges Field, the Azores. Americans would say Azores, the Azores, Portugal. It's an archipelago of islands, 6 or 7, I forget how many, in like almost the center of the Atlantic Ocean. But it belongs to Portugal, and the U.S. has an airbase there called Lodges Field. And when I first went there, I was on my way from Turkey back to the United States on leave. Basically, it's vacation. Okay. And we passed through there, and it was January. And I step off the plane, and I hear the sound of a lawnmower. And I'm smelling freshly cut grass. I'm like, wow, this would be nice. So I, go on to Philadelphia, spend my vacation there, and fly back through there. When I get back to Turkey, on my desk is an assignment saying, you're going to Lodges Field next, where I had just come from. So I spent 15 months there. And then from there, I came to Japan. In the Air Force, we have what's called a dream sheet, where you can list places in the United States or around the world that you want to go. And I all of the places I listed, I got. Oh, wow. Turkey, Portugal, and Japan. Oh, nice. And so, I came to Japan January 20th, 1982. I was 21 going on 22. And by that time, here I am, a professional broadcast journalist. And, I appeared on television as a television news anchor. I did radio announcing as well, news announcing. Again, there was CNN. Well, by the time I came to Japan, CNN was only 2 years old. And it was known as the Chicken Noodle Network because it was so young and there were a lot of on-air mistakes. And they've come full circle making on-air mistakes again, But anyway, so I come to Japan, worked at the Far East Network, Tokyo. Yokota Air Base was the main hub of the network. Okay. And we had stations in Misawa and Iwakuni and Sasebo and Okinawa. So after my military tour here in Japan, I went to work for the Tokyo Broadcasting System, TBS, Channel 6. And I was 23 going on 24, and I was hired to be an announcer, English language news announcer. Their evening news was translated into English, and I and my boss, Harry Queenie, we would read the news in English on a television sub-channel. It's called bilingual news here. Okay. You just press a button on your remote control and you hear the English language version of the Japanese program. Okay. And that's what I currently do for Japan's public broadcaster, NHK. Okay. The same thing. And I also am a news writer there, a television news writer for NHK. And in the past, I've been an on-air business correspondent. I covered the Tokyo Stock Exchange for a year and did many other things. A program called Tokyo Eye, which would just introduce various topics of Japan to the world. That's what I'm doing now. Forgive me for jumping back and forth.
That's okay.
But after at TBS, I moved to Hawaii. I just needed to change. Okay. I just felt I was young, I could do this, and we go back to the States. I didn't want to go back to the mainland. So I went as far as Hawaii, and I was hired by KGU, Talk Radio 76, the voice of Hawaii. Yeah. And here comes my little dog.
Hey, what's up? I think he wants to be interviewed as well.
Yeah, and...
So we have another guest, guys.
Yeah, what's his name again? So yes, after KGU, I went to work for KHVH News Radio 99, And while there, I had this desire to come back to Japan. So I got on the phone to. We didn't have the internet back then. You know, you had to use snail mail and the telephone. So I got on the phone, and my intent was to call all of the networks to see if there were any openings.
Okay. Back in Japan.
Back in Tokyo. Okay. Yeah. And so I called NBC. First I called CBS, and I couldn't get through to anyone. So then I called NBC. And the guy who answered the phone, well, he was in charge basically. He said, you know, it's interesting that you called because sitting right across from my desk is the NBC Tokyo correspondent Jack Russell. And I said, really? He says, well, I'll let you talk to him. So he handed the phone over to him, and I told him who I was and you know what I've done in the past, and you know that I'd like to go back. And he said, you know, it's interesting because you know over at ABC the correspondent is leaving, and yeah, so you ought to give them a call. He says, I don't have the number with me right now, so I called ABC in New York and said, I'm Robert Jefferson, blah 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 blah, and they said, oh really? Well, word gets around quick. You need to talk to Ray Homer in Tokyo. Yeah, he's our bureau chief there. So I had called him, and he says, yeah, word does get around quick. And he says, well, when can you come back? I said, yesterday. And so I applied, went to the Japanese consulate in Honolulu, and I applied for a visa to come back. And that didn't take much time at all. I was hired sight unseen. So I attached a photo to my resume, and a few weeks later, I got the visa and I came back, and I got my old job back at Tokyo Broadcasting System as well. Okay. So I was set. I worked for ABC News for 8 years as the Tokyo correspondent.
The devastation wrought by yesterday's tremor has been dubbed the 1995 Southern Hyogo Prefectural Earthquake. Rescue workers have been toiling non-stop for more than 24 hours. As the search for possible survivors buried beneath rubble continues, there have been some successes. Firefighters fought more than 10 blazes overnight, some of which were rekindled in the cold, dry climate characteristic of Japan's Pacific coastline in winter.
Robert Jefferson, ABC News Tokyo, reporting live. Now back to you.
Even while I was working with ABC News and TBS, the Tokyo Broadcasting System, I got a call from the West German public broadcaster Deutsche Welle. Back then, Germany, West Germany, East Germany were separate. And they asked me if I could do reporting for them as well. I said, sure. So I worked for them for about 3 years. And, you know, I covered stories such as the death of Emperor Showa, Emperor Hirohito, and the 1995 Kansai Awaji earthquake. And it was fascinating, yeah. Also in 1995, the sarin gas attack on the subway system. And I was supposed to be on that subway system that day. Oh, wow. But for some reason, it didn't work out that way. It didn't work out, so I was at home and immediately got to work covering what was going on there.
All day Monday, Tokyo residents were asking themselves and each other who would commit these acts of indiscriminate murder and why. Investigators of Japan's Metropolitan Police Agency, the Self-Defense Forces, fire department officials, and others have been trying to piece together the methodology of today's sarin gas attack on at least 5 subway cars at the height of the morning rush hour.
There was a chemical smell, and then everyone fell down.
We just wanted to get to a station so that we could get off the train. When we finally did, there were a lot of unconscious people.
Evening newspapers sold briskly as workers heading home sought to catch up on the latest information. Uniformed and plainclothes police were out in force on subway cars and inside stations, advising commuters to be aware of suspicious parcels and other objects. Robert Jefferson, ABC News, Tokyo.
Both of those stories in the same year, just months apart, was very exciting. You know, the earthquake, all the devastation that happened in Kobe, the sarin gas attack. It was quite heady, quite exciting. So from there, a few years later, I was hired to work for Bloomberg Television here in Tokyo as an anchor and news writer, and that was a lot of fun. And then in the year 2000, I turned 40. And had been in Japan for about 22 years, and I said, well, maybe it's time to go back to the United States. Oh. So I did, and my family, I have a twin sister, Cassandra, and my mother, Cortez. She was like, come on home, yeah, you can come on back. So I did. And a few months later, I was hired at WHYY in Philadelphia. Okay. It's a public radio station, an NPR affiliate, and a PBS affiliate, Public Broadcasting Service affiliate as well. So I worked there for 3 years, I think, and went back to Temple University, took a course there, and that was very, mentally, intellectually stimulating. So from there, I wanted some new challenges, so I got online again and found work at another community radio station in Bellevue, Washington, which is right outside of Seattle. And then I got a call from my old boss at TBS in Tokyo saying, can you come back to fill in for me? Because the person who took over after me had some personal problems, addiction problems, and he got fired. So I said, sure. I had left the community radio station in Bellevue, KBCS, and had started a small, fledgling PR company. Okay. And I didn't have any clients. So I said, sure, I'll come back. And I did. I went back to Tokyo and filled in for a while, and then went back to Seattle. And 2 weeks later, I got another call saying, can you come back again, in a few weeks? I said, sure. And when I got back, I said, listen, why don't I just move back here? Yeah. And I did. Went back to Seattle, went to the consulate, and I got my visa in like 2 weeks, and came back. And then I met someone who had worked at NHK at the time. He was a business anchor, and he had heard of me because he had worked at Bloomberg Television as well. We never worked together. I was there before he was, but he gave me the name and number of someone to contact at NHK. So I contacted this person, and he said, well, when can you start? We need some help. And so I come back to Tokyo. I'm working at two television and radio stations. Yeah. TBS has radio and television. NHK has radio and television. So I've been at NHK now, Japan's public broadcaster, for 13 years. TBS, that job ended in 2009. The company was having financial trouble, so they had to cut back. Okay. And we had been on the air there for probably 30 years. Oh, wow. I was there for 25 years. So yeah, and then a year after coming back, an old friend of mine said, how would you like to teach journalism at Temple University, Japan? I said, yeah, sure. And I've been there for 12 years now. Okay. This is my 12th year. And so yeah, I teach the history of journalism, ethics in journalism, media management in journalism, and other courses over the years I've taught. But now it's history and ethics that I teach. Okay. So tell me about your experience in the broadcast industry in Japan. What was that like? Being a foreigner, not only a foreigner, but a black man in that industry here. What was that like? It was very exciting. I felt as if I had as much, if not more, opportunity here. Oh, wow. When I was, my name was known. I was on television at the Far East Network, but that was only shown on bases. The civilians couldn't see it, but they could hear the radio. And a lot of Japanese would tune in to us to learn how to speak English. So my name was known. A lot of the businesses and diplomatic corps and whatnot would listen to us because we were the only thing in town. So that opened a lot of doors. Okay. My reputation preceded me, and it was quite exciting. Especially when I was hired at TBS, I had left the Air Force in December of 1983, and I didn't have work for 4 months. I was living in a house, of which I didn't pay rent for 4 months. And my landlady, she says, "Well, don't worry about it. Ishokkenmei yatte ganbatte kudasai." And 4 months later, I got hired at TBS. And my boss looked at me and I said how skinny I was. And he says, well, how much money do you need? And I said, oh, maybe 100,000 yen. It was about, I don't know what it was at the time, maybe, $800-900 or so. And he said, no, I think you need more than that. And we met at a coffee shop across the street from the TV station. Yeah. So he said, wait right here. He went down to the corner bank, to the ATM, and came back with a thick envelope with cash in it. Oh, wow. 500,000 yen. and says, he said, we'll work out a payment plan.
Wow.
And I went home and paid my 4 months back rent and bought a big case of beer and ordered some ramen delivered to my home. And I was like, whew, it was quite exciting. One other thing I forgot to mention was I worked at a cable television station here in Japan called JCTV, Japan Cable Television, which had a partnership with CNN through Asahi Television. And I was the weekend anchor there for 5 years, maybe. And the woman who I worked with then, I work with her again now at NHK. And a lot of the other people I worked with at TBS, we also work at NHK. It's a small, it's a small world here.
Okay.
Some of them I helped get hired at NHK, and others found their way on their own. But it's very exciting. I never experienced any racism in the business. Although I was also a professional voice actor, a narrator. For industrial, for corporate videos. Nikon, Americans would say Nikon, but it's Nikon. I did television commercials, voices for television commercials, Honda Ascot, FBTI debut, and others. Asahi Super Dry. I think it was like the second voice who did that commercial. A friend of mine, he was the first. But sometimes especially when I did corporate videos, I'd walk into the studio, the recording studio, and they see that I was black. And they would be shocked and look at each other, and somebody would excuse themselves and pull out their phone but pardon the pun, but after all was said and done, they were happy. But I could, and I got used to it real quick. But I always wore a suit and tie, always, and carried myself professionally, and and I was called back again and again and again. So it's been fabulous here. Pay wise, it's been great. Although I don't do much narration work now because the pay has just gone down so much that it's not even worth my time. And I'm happy doing what I do now. It's been fascinating. My work with ABC, having access to historical events, to be able to go to the Imperial Palace on New Year's Day when the Emperor greets the throngs of people, and get there early and, be able to look around and see things and then see all the people converge and the Emperor comes out and waves behind the bulletproof glass. Japan has an interesting history. That's why it's needed. But even though the emperors, all of them, they're so loved by so many people but hated by others. The night that the Emperor Showa died, I had been out partying, actually. I got home at 2 o'clock in the morning. We were on Death Watch at ABC. And I get home at about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I get a call from New York saying, it looks like the Emperor might be dying soon. Can you head to the bureau? And I said, sure. So I sobered up real quick, took a shower, jumped in a taxi, because I had been drinking. I had my own car, but I said, no, I better take a taxi. And while I was driving, it was announced on NHK that the Emperor had died. And we were at a stoplight, and the taxi driver started clapping.
Wow.
And I said, she said, no, why are you clapping? He says, I hated him. He got us into World War II, and so many people suffered. My family suffered. I suffered.
So what about Japan overall? Like, what do you like the most about Japan?
The freedom. The sense of security. I have no fear here. I am a free black man here. I get dirty looks sometimes, I just bought a new car. Somebody might be jealous because I'm driving a new Prius. But that's minor. Most Japanese are so sweet and kind and gentle. I take my morning walks with my dog, and I become friends with others who go out and do the radio exercises, and people in the neighborhood. I'm a member of the town association, the Chonaikai, where we decide, small things like where to put the trash and, whether to do this or have repairs to that. And, it's just, I feel free to be me here. I don't have to speak in a certain way. I don't have to walk in a certain way. I do it my way.
Yeah.
It's just the freedom to be me, and the sense of civility here. Tokyo is the largest city in the world. The greater Tokyo metro area, which includes my city, Kamakura, Yokohama, and other cities as well. But it was just voted recently the safest city in the world.
Wow.
The biggest city is the safest city in the world. The quality of life here is fabulous. It's wonderful. And out here, away from Tokyo, the air is much cleaner. When I first moved to Japan in '82, the air was terrible. Diesel fumes, bus fumes, whatnot. The level of pollution has come down dramatically. But in Tokyo, it's such a crowded city that it's still there. But out here, the air is much cleaner. It's not totally clean, mind you, but it's much cleaner than in the center of Tokyo or within the Tokyo environs. There's just a quality of life. I don't have to worry about things. I don't have to worry about the police beating me upside the head. They're very polite. I get stopped for speeding, and they're very polite. They're strict, much stricter than they used to be. Years ago, if you got caught drinking and driving, you just went to the police station and you wrote, I'm sorry, 100 times. And, that was the end of that. But no, they're much more stricter with that. But yeah, I have no problem with the police. Actually, a police officer came on his little motorbike, his little scooter, and he had slipped and fell into some mud.
Yeah.
So I'm helping him clean off his pant leg and whatnot. And he was quite happy about that. I saw him again, and he remembered me and waved. And I've never been stopped to ask for my ID or anything. If I need to go to the police station, my dog escaped, too many times, and I had to go to the police station and say, yep, he's here. Somebody found him and turned him over to the police. Yeah. They're nice. I have never had any problems with the police.
So what do you think is the general attitude towards black people here in Japan, in your opinion?
Well, generally, I think it's respect, curiosity, admiration, fear. Some people are fearful. And it's the old Simpsons episode, Marge Simpson with Bleeding Gums Murphy, the sax player. And Lisa's out jamming with him under the bridge, and Marge finds her and says, "Excuse me, it's just no hard feelings, but I just fear the unknown," or something to that effect. And I think Japanese are like that. But if you're polite and you greet them, I greet everyone, and sometimes I don't get a greeting in response. It's like, okay, I'll remember that face. I won't say anything next time. But generally, people are very nice and respectful.
Is there anything about Japan that rubs you the wrong way? Like maybe,
spitting.
Really? Wait.
Yeah, men spitting.
You see that a lot in Japan?
Yeah. They open the car door.
Wow.
Yeah, that really bothers me.
I hardly see that.
Yeah, I see it a lot because I drive here, so I'm noticing things like that.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you go down 246 at Tamagawa Dori from say Komozawa Yoga towards Shibuya, look at the guardrail. All the spit marks on the guardrail. Oh. I noticed stuff like that. Yeah. When I first came to Japan, it was peeing. Older taxi drivers get out the car and pee right on the roadside.
Oh, really?
That's illegal now. But
wow.
yeah.
I wanted to ask you, you've been there for a long time. Is there something that you've learned about Japan, or instead of that, how has Japan changed in the last 38 years, in your opinion, in terms of its relationship with foreigners?
Much more. When I came to Japan in 1982, January of '82, we were an unknown entity for most Japanese. I would have little old ladies come up to me at the train station, where you live now, and they're like 4 feet tall, maybe 4.5 feet tall, and without saying anything to me, they would measure themselves to my hip or whatever. Yeah. They say like, "Hora, mite kudasai. Watashi wa koko made da yo. Kare wa hashi dake da yo. He's got only legs. He's all legs." And then they'd giggle and walk away.
Yeah.
I would be driving, and I would have entire families at the traffic light, faces pressed against the window, staring at me.
Yeah.
He can drive.
Wow.
There was a lot of curiosity, Oftentimes, if you were to ask questions, like, oh, no English, no English, no English, and they would do this right in your face, no English, no English, and you'd be speaking Japanese. It was a lot of fear of the foreigner, the outsider, the fear of the unknown. Japanese people have opened up now. I mean, I was just walking my dog the other day, and I saw this kid with dreads or braids or something in his hair. You see that a lot. Japan has opened up quite a bit, and I think China's going through the same thing now.
I see.
Yeah, I think China, the same thing is happening now. It's been nice. Some things have fallen by the wayside, but some, like traditions and things. For example, we used to send New Year's greeting cards to each other. People still do that, but I don't do it anymore. And I don't get many. I get them from Toyota. My car dealership sends me them, but that's about it. But I used to go out and buy them and sign them and send them out. Take them to the post office and send them out and get a whole bunch in return. Things like, do you have a meishi, a name card?
Yes, I do.
You do? I don't. I should, but I don't. Small things like that. When I first came here, the main restaurants, foreign restaurants, were Indian restaurants and Italian restaurants and French restaurants, but there were so few. And now it's a smorgasbord of everything here. Vegan restaurants, vegetarian.
They need more.
It's a food paradise now. Michelin stars all over the place. Japan has matured in a lot of ways. Not just demographically, but and that's going to be a problem. People aren't having children as much as they used to. Things like housing. I was only discriminated against once. I was at ABC News at the time, and this guy, I had called him and said, I saw your ad in such and such a publication, and he says, well, what do you do? I said, I'm a foreign correspondent for ABC News. He goes, oh, great. And he says, he's asking, certain questions, and he says, but there are two kinds of people I don't want to rent to. I don't want to rent to models or black people. And I said, well, why is that? He says, well, models, they're just here for a short time, they tear up the place, and he said, black people do the same thing, And I said, well, Mr. So-and-so, I'm black, I'm a professional, I work for ABC News, I'm a foreign correspondent, I work for Deutsche Welle as well. If that's how you feel, I don't want to live in your place.
Oh, wow.
And I hung up the phone.
What about the Japanese language? Like, any advice for people, or how did you learn it, and maybe you can impart some advice?
It's interesting. When I first came to Japan, I couldn't speak Japanese at all. It's an interesting language. I mean, it's tough at first to learn. It took me 2 years to be comfortable. I would go to parties with friends, and I would just sit and listen and watched how people, interacted with each other and try to pick up certain words. All the while I was studying on my own, sort of half-assedly, but I finally did it. I eventually went to a Japanese Language Institute, an intense course, a 3-month course, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for 3 months, and that helped tremendously. I mean, just learning how to count something, something as simple as bottles. 1本, 2本, 3本, 4本, and pieces of paper, 1枚, 2枚, 3枚, and such. You have to learn that stuff. Television helped a lot. Cartoons, like Sazae-san. Watching that, this was about a family, and all of the characters had names of fish, or fish eggs or something like that. And just seeing how families interacted with each other. It was a nuclear family. The kids lived with their parents, and the parents lived with the husband's parents, and to see the dynamics of how families interacted with each other. And this is a daily routine of the fathers going to work and playing catchball. Little things like that. One has to immerse oneself and stay away from foreigners for a little while, or at least sequester. Have just a little bit of time for foreigners and immerse yourself into the local culture. Go to find a favorite restaurant. Or a pub, and go there and talk to the people and build up your vocabulary. Everyday stuff. Some of the stuff in the books, that's great to know, but the best thing is to learn how to speak it the way you would speak it every day. And then go back and fill in the blanks of grammar and syntax and all of that.
Can you give us some advice on surviving and thriving in Japan over the long term?
Get your affairs in order. Pay your taxes here. Go to the tax office. If you're not quite sure what to do, go there and ask them. They'll be, willing to help. Pay your taxes. Pay your health insurance. If you break the law, don't get caught. Yeah, long term, really. I mean, my taxes are in order. I pay my health insurance. Whenever need be. My pension has been paid up. I'm 59 years old, and at 59, that's when you make your last payment. And I've paid it off all in one fell swoop. You can pay it off in installments, but I paid it off in one fell swoop. Get that out of the way. Just stay ahead of that, because a few years ago I let it get out of control, and it was tough. And I had to really knuckle down and get that taken care of. Back taxes, back health insurance that I hadn't paid, and so now I'm debt free. Everything's paid up, and I'll never let that happen again. But for the long term, I've got my pension in order. Healthcare here in Japan is fabulous. And it's single payer, and the government, oversees it. I don't know what's going on in the United States, but it's a mess there, and it's just greed, basically. When I go there, I only pay 30% of the costs of whatever.
This is true.
And if you stay healthy, everyone benefits.
So what about well-being? Because I know you're here by yourself. Like, do you get lonely sometimes? How do you deal with that?
Not really, because I've moved to a community where I've made friends here. My neighbors across the street are very good friends. Once, 2 or 3 times a year, I'll have a dinner party here. New Year's Eve, everyone comes over to my house for a dinner party.
Oh, nice.
I'll have my birthday party in June, in the summer. So I did have 2 dogs. One of them died earlier this year in February. But Spunky, he's still around. He keeps me out of trouble. He keeps me out of bars and and spending tons of money in restaurants. And I've learned to cook. You've seen my kitchen. It's quite decked out. I've got like 19 pieces of cast iron. All of my utensils are hanging up, so I don't have to dig through drawers to find stuff. I've got 2 refrigerators. The freezers are filled up with food and lamb and rack of lamb or whatever.
So the key for people who came here by themselves is to make friends with the locals, right?
Yes, make friends with the locals and get your life in order. And it's easy to do that here. It's easy to get distracted by going out, and I mean, I was younger, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I would spend tons of money running around the streets and bars and whatnot.
So when you say in order, what do you mean exactly?
As I say, pay your taxes, pay your bills, go to work on time, and then you create a life for yourself, and make sure everything is done the way it's supposed to be done, and then you can sit back and relax and enjoy. I'm a gardener. That's a hobby of mine. I cook, and I go on YouTube and find all kinds of cooking channels and try it. And I'll contact the people who run the channel and say, "Oh, I tried your dish and it was fantastic." And a Chinese woman who says, "Thank you so much," or a Turkish woman. And I said, I lived in Turkey. I said, "Merhaba," hello. I tried your dish and it was fantastic. It reminds me of when I lived in Turkey 40 years ago.
Oh wow.
Wow. So I mean, you have, as I've said before, leave your baggage back at the port of disembarkation, or embarkation. Wherever you're coming from, leave your ugly baggage there. Come here with a new mindset, with an open heart, with an open mind, and prepare for something new. You can stay who you are. Actually, you can grow as who you are. You can bring your culture here. I love jazz. I don't listen to it much anymore because I've heard damn near every song there is. I used to hang out in all of the jazz clubs in Tokyo, Satin Doll, After 6, the jazz coffee shops. They have the jazz kisaten, the coffee shops where they play jazz. At certain hours you can't talk. It's just music being played.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and there was one near the ABC Bureau in Shibuya, Tokyo, and I would go there before work or after work and just, listen to all the jazz greats. But so I mean, I've hung out with the jazz drummer Elvin Jones and I mean, I can even show you this here. I did a concert with jazz pianist Onishi Junko.
Oh, that's you.
Yeah, that's me. Okay. And I read poetry.
Okay, okay.
During her concert. I was on stage reading poetry, and I chose Maya Angelou. A rock, a river, a tree, host, a species long since departed, mark the mastodon, the dinosaur that left tokens of their existence on these floors, on these ocean floors, or something like that, yeah.
What's the common misconception about Japan?
That the Japanese are racist. Sure, there's some racist people here, but Japanese are very shy, very shy. And it may appear as though they don't want to have anything to do with foreigners, black, white, or whatever, but it's not that. It's for most of their lives, they've only known other Japanese people. Japan, for many Japanese, is very homogeneous. There are many Chinese here, hundreds of thousands of them, Koreans, but you can't necessarily tell that by looking at them. You know, and many of them were born here and grew up here. Many Koreans, although they held on to their nationality, they were born here. They only speak Japanese. They have Japanese names. So, and that's part of how Japan has changed. I feel Japan has changed over the decades that I've been here, is that they're much more open now, much more accepting. But they can be, once they get to know you, they're wonderful. Yeah.
Is there a place in Japan that you think is a must visit? So if someone is coming here for the first time, you'd say, look, don't leave Japan until you've visited this place.
I would say come to Kamakura. There's a number of places. Hokkaido, especially in the summertime, it's beautiful. Nikko, to get away from the heat of Tokyo in the summer. Kyoto, Nara, beautiful cities. Go to the Japan Sea Coast. Itoigawa, Nagano. I mean, you come to Tokyo, but get out. Go to Okinawa. It's beautiful there. The Izu Oshima Islands, the Izu Island chain, which is part of Tokyo actually. Yeah, and it takes an overnight ferry to get there, but it's very beautiful. Yeah.
Any ambitions for life in Japan going forward?
To enjoy the rest of my life. Like I said, I'm 59 years old. I plan on retiring here. Well, not necessarily retire. I want to continue working, but I will die here. Yeah, and probably be cremated here. And just enjoy the life here, the sense of security, the wonderful food, the people, the opportunities. As I get older, I'm sure, other opportunities will come along. Just to do the right thing, not get in any trouble, and enjoy, I've got more years behind me than in front of me. Wow. But just to enjoy what I've worked hard for. That's what I try to do. I'm not looking to show off or anything. I'm just looking for life's little comforts, and I found them.
Okay. Any advice for people looking? So two groups, right? Two groups of people. Those who are looking to come to Japan. Any advice for them, and those who are already here, maybe for anywhere from 1 year upwards.
And I think I touched on that earlier. Get your affairs in order and keep them that way. Make friends. Japanese, foreigners. There's so many different kinds of foreigners here. You meet people that you would never have met before in your life had you not been here. For people who are planning to come here, like I say, leave, the negative stuff, baggage, preconceived notions and whatnot, at the point of embarkation, at the airport when you leave, when you get here, start anew, start afresh. Be open-minded. Get used to how things are done here. Understand why things are done a certain way here, even if they may seem silly or unnecessary. When in Rome, We don't need to Americanize Japan. Let Japan be Japan. Who was it? The former foreign minister, who is now the defense minister, Taro Kono, wants his name to be Kono Taro. Like the Japanese do it. They don't want it anglicized with the first name, the given name first, and the family name last. Here in Japan, it's the family name first, and the given name last. And when I signed my documents, I just bought a new car, and I signed Jefferson Robert. not Robert Jefferson.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how it is on my license. That's how it is on official documents. Yeah. So, when in Rome. Yeah.
What about people who want to get into like the industry that you're in Japan? Like, any advice for them? Because people might be wondering, like, how do I do this? Like, get to NHK or media?
Come equipped. Come equipped. Come with experience. It's very hard to try to get that experience here. I have, my students at Temple University, they ask me the same question. How can I get a job there? And I says, well, you need experience first. And they don't do internships because it's too time consuming.
Okay.
We have a newsroom to run, and we don't have time to be babysitting, interns. Bloomberg Television, we had interns, and one of them, she's now an anchor at NHK. Come equipped. There is and you might want to meet this person here. I forget his last name, but his first name is Tietzi. He's black, from South Africa, and he just started as a weatherman.
Okay.
With dreads, pulled up into a little bun on top, Yeah, and it's fascinating to see. And that's, for me, what's so important in my career, was to pave the way for others to come behind me. And not screw up. It's like, oh, wow, we hired that other black guy, and, Robert Jefferson was terrible. No. I think I've left, a nicely paved path for others to come behind me, but come equipped.
So how can people find you online?
Well, I don't do social media much. There's only one social media that I'm into now. I used to be on Facebook. And I had a sneaking suspicion that Facebook was not being totally up and up with what they're doing. So I closed my account years ago. I do have a YouTube channel.
Okay.
It's called The Kamakura Gardener. But I've only posted one video. And, I may have like 47 or maybe, about 47, less than 50 subscribers. And that's fine with me. I've been in the public eye all of my adult life, since a teenager, actually. And, I just wanted to have my privacy back. I was, a little bit worried about even doing this interview, I was recognized, everywhere I went, and now I'm not, and it's nice to be anonymous again. But yeah, I can be reached there, and I always respond. People will say, the video I posted is about gardening, and I, show my garden, and that was 2 years ago that I posted that video, and I haven't posted anything since then. But people still comment, oh, you have a nice garden. And, so that's about the only place. And and if they might come across me on your channel, if I make a comment.
Okay, so, guys, there you have it. This was Robert Jefferson. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please give it a big thumbs up, and remember to subscribe to this channel for weekly videos on the Black experience across the globe. Until next time, bye for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to share your story or have us visit your region, send us a message on any of our social media platforms or via our website.
That's good.